You're listening to Booth Talk from the After Movie Diner, and on this episode, we are exceptionally happy to have directors Zach Lipovsky and Adam B. Stein, who made the sci-fi horror superhero thriller Freaks, which opens tomorrow as I record this, but probably the day you're listening to this, Friday the 13th, 2019. It stars Emile Hirsch, Bruce Dern, and Lexy Kolker. It is a fantastic movie, and we here at the After Movie Diner urge you to go check it out. It's in theaters probably today, the day you're listening to this, Friday the 13th, 2019. Freaks. And I talked to director-writers Zach Lipovsky and Adam B. Stein all about making the movie, casting the movie, and the thoughts and theories behind the film. It's a fantastic conversation. I do hope you enjoy it. And as always, if you've been enjoying this series of interviews, you can find more of them over at aftermoviediner.com or by subscribing and listening to Booth Talk on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, wherever podcasts are found. Booth Talk is there. It's part of the After Movie Diner station on Spreaker, so follow us on there. And don't forget, wherever your podcasts are found, rate and review us, tell people about us. It would be a huge help. You can also go over to Patreon, patreon.com/ After Movie Diner, and support the show with a little monetary contribution, which, as it is September, is what our sponsors for the entire month of September did. The amazing podcast, How I Ripped Off Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Here is their promo.
When award-nominated screenwriter Chip Thompson, that's me, hi, was 14, he was mildly obsessed with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, comic books, and a whole manner of geeky pop culture. So he decided to write his own series, centering around what it would be like if he and his best friend and co-host MC,
that would be me,
were supernatural crime-fighting ninjas in Tokyo. It was as terrible as it sounds, full of plagiarism, clumsy references, and outright stealing of ideas, mixed with its own unique blend of B-movie horror and superhero plots and ideas. Now, 17 years later, Chip and MC read through each episode of this series, much to Chip's chagrin, brought to life with their unique acting skills. Whether you're a Buffy fan or enjoy the works of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, My Dad Wrote a Porno, The Evil Dead, or you just like to hear a grown man wince at his teenage ramblings, we think you'll enjoy the How I Ripped Off Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast. Available on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Stitcher Radio. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com How I Ripped Off Podcast, or on Twitter at How I Ripped Off.
And thanks to their very generous sponsorship of the show over on patreon.com / After Movie Diner, we are able to continue bringing you the best possible content we can produce, both on our website, aftermoviediner.com, and on the various podcasts that we host around the internet. Please do check us out, and if you've enjoyed it, tell your friends, tell your family, rate and review us, and share the information on social. It really does help. It's fantastic. Anyway, enough of me droning on. Let us get over to this fantastic conversation with Zach and Adam, the writer-directors of Freaks, which is out Friday the 13th, 2019, and stars Emile Hirsch, Bruce Dern, and Lexy Kolker. It has got superhero elements, it's got horror elements, it's got thriller elements, it's got sci-fi elements. It is for the genre crowd, and people are going to love it. Do go check it out and enjoy this conversation with Zach and Adam.
We're awesome.
Good. How's your press day gone? It's been a long day so far, huh?
It's just so much fun to talk to people about the movie. We wrote this movie in a coffee shop, just hoping that one day we might make it, never dreaming that years later we would be doing a press junket for its theatrical debut. So it's been a pretty amazing, experience.
Yeah, of course, I can imagine. And it's a fantastic film, a lot of fun, very mysterious, a lot of kind of different genres all mashed into it. We really enjoyed it here at the After Movie Diner.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Some people have described it as the kitchen sink of genre,
Yeah.
which kind of love, and a lot of that comes from basically us wanting to tell a movie from the perspective of the lead character of Chloe. And we wanted, when she's feeling scared, it feels like a horror film. When she doesn't know what's going on, it's a mystery. But as she starts to explore the world and be filled with wonder, it starts to feel like Spielberg. Or when she starts feeling bloodlust and revenge, it starts feeling like Tarantino. So that came from just kind of trying to be true to her perspective.
Yeah, so what was the origin of this particular story, and what inspired you both to tell it the way you did?
There were a couple inspirations. One was my experience as a new dad, seeing my son grow up and start to learn about the world and try to make sense of it. Kids are so fascinating when they're trying to figure out the world and try to understand what's real and what's imaginary, what's good and what's evil. And we were both fascinated by kind of talking to him as he was growing up. And as longtime sci-fi and horror fans, we started thinking about what it would be like to tell a sci-fi story from the perspective of a child. Because as that child was trying to figure out the world, if the audience only knew what the child knew, they would be trying to figure it out too. You wouldn't know what was real and what wasn't, or what was dangerous and what was safe. So that was kind of one of the main inspirations. And then the other was this thought about superpowers and about how the sort of brainstorming about what would really happen if people started developing special abilities. Would it really be like Marvel says, where they all dress in costume and have, nicknames and go off and save people? Or would it be a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more personal? And so we thought of this world as a place where there are superpowers but no superheroes. No one's going off to save strangers. They're just trying to survive.
Yeah, and it's definitely it's definitely a really interesting film the way you've crafted it, because, like you say, it is from the perspective of the child, but also there's this sort of wonderful dark humor to the story that the power the little girl has is sort of, or initially as the power kind of comes through her, is kind of getting her way when she says something over and over again, which seems like a wonderful sort of fatherly perspective of not being able to say no to your little girl.
Yeah, I mean, all the powers of the film come from the character's deepest desire. So for her, she's a little kid who never gets to go outside and never gets to do what she wants.
And never has any power over her world.
So the way that her power expresses itself is she has the ability to tell people to do what she wants, and she has the ability to reach out beyond the walls and bring the outside world to her. And all the other characters follow that same logic. The father wants to protect her and literally put her in a bubble, and her mom wants to escape, and her grandfather is just a trickster who's kind of wants to manipulate everyone and kind of go in and out of situations. And so to make all of the different powers relevant to each of the characters in a way that was character-driven.
Yeah, it's sort of, there have been some superhero films that have dealt with the idea of sort of a child discovering their powers, but it's normally sort of a scene, and by about the next scene, they're okay with it, and they're you know what I mean? And everything's kind of gone off in the usual superhero route. Most of the bigger movies do not take the kind of care, attention, and time you guys take, and it was nice to see that as a sort of deliberate choice that you guys were making.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, seeing visions like Chloe's would really be terrifying.
Right.
She has no idea what they are. And so that idea of these powers are kind of terrifying. seemed pretty fascinating to explore.
Yeah. But also the idea that kids' imagination is so open and so vast that while there is fear, there's also a weird acceptance. It's almost if an adult had those same visions, we would be more freaked out by them.
My son would say, hear a car alarm go off down the street, and he would freak out. What is that? Oh my gosh, are those bad guys? But of course, to him, dragons and creatures like that were real, and they were out there, and they were nothing to worry about. So it's so fascinating to see how kids make sense of the world.
But there definitely is. I think you're touching on to something that I always thought was interesting about the film, which is she just has her limited perspective of what is real and what is normal. And her perspective of what is normal is different than ours as an audience, because we don't know the world that she's in just as much as she doesn't.
Yeah.
So the things that happen to her and the things that she has to do to survive, in some ways just end up being the normal things that all the other adults around her seem to be doing. So when it comes to having to start to hurt people, it doesn't seem that strange to her, because it just seems like that's normal in this world. And that is, I find, one of the more disturbing and kind of interesting parts of the movie.
Yeah, the difference between the character's perspective and the audience also comes into play, like when she walks up to the ice cream truck, which to her, she's a little bit worried about, but audiences are super freaked out.
Yeah.
Because they assume Bruce Dern, they worry about all sorts of things that she would never think about. So it's very fun to play with those expectations.
We love the idea of taking a science fiction world, but seeing it through the eyes of a kid, because you as the audience don't know anything about that world, just like she doesn't know anything about the world. And so you're totally in her perspective, and you're along for the ride with her, which we found really powerful.
And as the film progresses, your allegiances, or your allegiance is the wrong word, but your understanding and your sympathies move from character to character. At the beginning, you think the dad is this sort of insane, paranoid shut-in who's sort of inhibiting his child's, natural growth, not giving her any kind of moral guidance, but just trying to kind of force her to be this fake thing. And then you suddenly realize that, no, actually, he was genuinely trying to protect her with all the ability that he had. And it's interesting the way that shift happens in the story. The other thing that came across, apart from sort of a commentary with our modern fascination with superhero movies, which I think at some point someone's got to kind of delve into, but also the current situation sort of with immigration in the US in a little way. I mean, obviously sci-fi has those parallels, but was this intentional, or did it just happen because of the nature of the story?
Yeah, I mean, it started from the characters in the world and thinking about this family in this world. And then we drew on a few inspirations. I grew up going to a Jewish school, and we learned about the Holocaust all the time. And, so many stories of what parents tried to do to help their kids survive. And that's kind of where the story of him trying to train her to go across the street and live with this other family, that sort of was inspired by those types of stories. But at the same time, we were writing the script during Trump's campaign, when he kicked off his campaign rhetoric with extreme xenophobia. And so all those sorts of sentiments found their way into the world.
And we kind of looked throughout history at all the different times that, and unfortunately there's quite a few of them, where people have been, separated, segregated, or, persecuted because of who they are, or being different than what the normals or the government wants. And we just looked for all the different ways that people dealt with that, or children dealt with it and tried to survive, so that the film almost spoke to a universal truth. And one of the interesting things that happened is when we wrote the movie during Trump's campaign, by the time the movie came out at its first film festival, at the Toronto Film Festival, by that point, kids were being separated from their families and put in camps, which is something that happens in the movie. And everyone was like, how did you know that was going to be the case? And we were like, hey, when we were writing it, it was science fiction. But the reason we wrote it is because this has happened over and over and over again throughout history. When people start doing this, this is what they do, and it's unfortunate. It's history repeats itself, and so it's not that we came up with that idea. It's that it's sort of one of those universal truths that we were trying to write a cautionary tale about.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it's you sort of see it with films and literature from the past resurfacing recently, because it's kind of speaking to the same thing as well, sort of similar themes that this film touches on. So as we've just got a few minutes left, let's quickly talk about this amazing cast. Emile Hirsch has been one of my favorite actors since I first saw Into the Wild. I mean, he is never used nearly enough, and it's always a joy to see him in the film. How did he come to be in Freaks? What was the casting process for that?
Yeah, I mean, we were really, as we said, we this movie was a very low budget. We were making it with just a lot of passion and trying to do our best to bring it to life. And part of that was trying to write really engaging, complicated characters so that big actors would be interested in the roles, even though we couldn't pay them a lot of money. And Emile and Bruce came on board both because they really saw something in the characters that spoke to their real life. Emile was recently a new father and had never played a father before, and becoming a father was a really big part of his life, and so he really wanted to kind of portray all the messiness and kind of ups and downs of fatherhood. And Bruce, obviously he has a very famous daughter, and in the movie his character is kind of obsessed with protecting his daughter, but he also actually had a daughter before Laura who died very young. And that idea of sort of protecting his daughter at all costs was something that Bruce really connected to. So each of them, found personal things in the story that made it more than just sort of a science fiction movie, but made it a very personal, family, kind of character-driven drama. And they had really interesting characters that, as you said, go from being people you aren't so sure about to people that you're completely rooting for, but then you're rooting for them, but you're not sure if you like what they're doing.
Every actor loves playing something unpredictable, and having the characters be in this muddy, messy, gray area was really fun for all of them.
Yeah, and obviously the sort of third part of the cast is a wonderful discovery. Lexy Kolker, who played the young girl in the film. Was it daunting casting a role for an actor that young, and how did you find Lexy?
Yeah, well, when we wrote the script and we realized, okay, we're going to try to make this thing, we looked at each other and said, we're really stupid. How did we write a movie that a 7-year-old is in every scene driving the story forward, not just standing there and watching the adults, but driving it forward with her performance? It was kind of foolhardy. And then we just started a casting process where our casting directors, saw hundreds of actresses, and we approached the auditions very differently than normal. Usually kids come in and they're very rehearsed on the material. They know their lines word by word, but with very little of the meaning behind them. What we were trying to find was an actress who could get very real and very deep emotionally. So what we tried to do was improvise with them, even in the audition process. So we were sitting on the floor with our shoes off with coloring books, and we would have the kids come in and just sit and color with us, and we'd start talking to them about their lives and say things like, hey, so have you ever had an argument with your parents? What was it about? And, they wouldn't let me go to a sleepover. Oh, okay, well, let's do that scene. Let's pretend that this actor friend of ours over here is your dad, and, fight with him about the sleepover. And in doing kind of improvised scenes like that from their lives, we would tap into the real feelings that would often be forgotten when they would just do the scenes. And for the best kids, they would get there emotionally and then transition to the lines. So, for instance, with Lexy, she was yelling at our friend who had this, let me go to the sleepover, I hate you. And then transition to talking about, I want ice cream instead of the sleepover.
Yeah.
And she was just, nostrils flaring, eyes watering, fierce, powerful. And then when we said, okay, cut, that was great, she immediately switched back into being sort of a happy, bubbly 7-year-old girl and said, "Wow, that was really fun. You guys are really great." And we could tell that she understood that this was just acting.
Yeah.
Because a couple of the young actors we saw could get to deep places emotionally, but then would be very disturbed by them.
Yeah.
And it was important that, we find someone who knew it was just a performance.
And was excited by it. She was excited by the potential of the role rather than scared of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's a wonderful ensemble. And like I say, a really interesting film and written in a way that just on one hand could be very simple, but on the other hand seems very complex. Meaning the emotions that you get in touch with and the family conflicts in it. You go, oh, I see where that's coming from, but also it's kind of complex because you're like, yes, but how did they put it down on paper so acutely? So it was especially from the family and perspective mixed with the fantasy. It was really well done, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well,
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to see it and talk about it.
Yeah. And tell everyone it comes out Friday the 13th in September.
Yeah, we will. We'll be reviewing it.
There.
Yeah, we'll be reviewing it on the website and putting this interview up to companion that the week leading up to it in September. So we look forward to that. And we're After Movie Diner anywhere on social. So if you're out there and you want to share it, we'll let you know. But thanks ever so much for chatting today, guys, and best of luck for the rest of your press day.
Thanks.
Thank you. Talk soon.
And if you've liked this interview, you can find other interviews like it over at aftermoviediner.com. Like my recent interview with Hayley Griffith, the star of Satanic Panic, which is out now in theaters and on video on demand. Check out Satanic Panic. It's a fantastic movie, lots of fun, and listen to our interview with Hayley Griffith. We also have interviews with Michael Madsen, with two of the kids in the hall, Scott Thompson and Kevin McDonald, as well as people like Peter Weller, Bruce Campbell, Ted Raimi, Michael Ironside, you name it, we have it. aftermoviediner.com/interviews. Go check them out, read them, listen to them, and enjoy them.